We have been inundated over the past year with so many reports of USOs.
What exactly is a USO?
You've heard of unidentified flying object, UFO. USO is submerged. It's an unidentified submerged object.
I mean, I'm telling you, the email traffic has been huge. Finally, here we are on the Royal Indulgence. We are sailing into Gulf Breeze, a hotspot of USO activity.
A lot of people have seen objects here, but it's not just here. It's also throughout the Gulf of Mexico and throughout the Caribbean area.
The whole Ed Walters sighting of Gulf Breeze in the late 1980s was heavily documented with photographs.
From 1987 to 1992, more than 200 UFO and USO sightings are reported in the Gulf Breeze area.
Of all places, why Gulf Breeze?
Good question. We don't know why. We surmise that maybe there's an undersea USO base.
An underwater UFO base. It's an exciting concept to think about, but how do we even begin to find evidence to support this theory?
If we're starting to look for bases for these things to fly out of, it's taking it to a whole nother level that I'm not exactly comfortable with yet.
Do you admit that UFOs exist?
No, not yet.
Do you admit there's a possibility of UFOs?
Oh,
I mean, you've
absolutely.
seen some startling photos,
I've
right?
seen some photos, I've seen some footage, and I've heard some stories that I cannot explain. However, nothing points to extraterrestrials being the explanation.
We've just uncovered the most incredible evidence. A former Marine and War Games planner has just discovered what some experts are convinced is an underwater USO base. He may well have an explanation for where all these USOs seen over Gulf Breeze are coming from.
When I was planning a war game, I came across this island that was south of Cuba. I noticed some strange underwater symmetry that was not natural.
Retired Marine Gunnery Sergeant Butch Diaz has served in Somalia and in Iraq, and his credentials are impeccable.
Okay, to the north is the main island of Cuba. To the west is the Isle of Wight. And this off to the east of, I think it's right around 3 miles, is this feature here. It looks like two intersecting, to me I thought initially runways.
It is an amazing image, but it could just be a natural geologic feature, or maybe just a coral reef.
I know that coral reefs aren't formed in a straight line, much less two straight lines intersecting to form an X, so this is pretty compelling.
How heavily trafficked is this, by commercial traffic or sea traffic?
I would say local fishermen, and that would pretty much be it, just because it is Cuban waters.
What about naval activity in this area?
Yeah, I would say if there's any, it's probably light, and there again, it would have to be Cuban.
Butch, I mean, you've seen imagery like this from around the world, correct?
Yes.
Have you seen anything else like this anywhere else on the planet?
Not like this, no.
This is two lines intersecting. Have you ever seen a single line?
Single lines? Yes. As a matter of fact, to the south of this image off the map here, there's a few, but you can tell those are actually gullies up underneath the water just because they're a little more shallow, and you can tell they're actually sort of like a runoff.
Is it possible that these are just two gullies that happen to be intersecting?
I would say no.
Okay.
Why do you say that?
It looks like these are actually raised above the subsurface floor.
Meaning they're not gullies.
No, they're not.
They're actually convex, elevated
yes.
lines. How long are these lines?
Approximately 1 mile.
Wow.
Now, could you actually insert a diving team in this area without alerting the Cubans?
No, I would not. I would not try that or advise it to anyone.
So those are Cuban waters there?
Yes, they are.
I wonder what the angle is and how perfect it is on both sides.
It looks pretty straight, and it looks like the angle is a specific angle as opposed to random. If you extended this line and to the east-southeast, it's almost as though it's pointing towards Guantanamo.
It certainly is curious that that line points almost right towards Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, that's what's bothering me. I mean, what does this mean going off in this direction? One of these underwater structures is pointing directly at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and this area is experiencing a lot of USO activity. Officially, the U.S. military isn't talking about it, but some of the rank and file are.
I don't know what I saw. I still can't explain what it was. Never seen anything like it before. I haven't seen anything like it since.
We're here in Alexandria, Virginia, and we're meeting Charles Howard, who years ago when he was stationed on the USS Thorn at Guantanamo saw a strange object under the water. You've been on the sea how long?
I've been in the Navy 19 years now.
And you've had sea duty for most of that?
I got about 12 years of sea time.
So you've seen objects in the water?
I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like that that I've seen in Guantanamo. Well, the year was 2000. We went on Liberty that night. When I was coming back from Liberty, I wanted to get back to the ship because it was late, about 2200. So I'm about 30 paces ahead of everyone. When I noticed something out the corner of my eye, it started pulsating like a soft white light.
Where was it?
It was in the water. It was about 100 yards from the pier. As it got brighter and brighter, I stopped and I looked at it. It started pulsating a little bit faster. So then 2 other lights popped up behind it, and then they started pulsating. And all 3 of them started pulsating at the same time.
But how deep were the lights?
They appeared to be just beneath the water. They started vibrating, but the water wasn't moving. And that's when I got a little bit nervous. And then I was like, hey, come here, look at this, look at this. But by the time they got there, because again, I was ahead of everybody, I point and they was gone.
The USO that Petty Officer Charles Howard saw was vibrating just beneath the surface, yet there was no sound and no wake whatsoever.
This was late when you were coming back. Their ship was about 10 p.m.?
2200, correct.
All right, and you were on Liberty, so I imagine you were out having some fun, maybe?
In Guantanamo, there's no overnight Liberty, so there was no time for that. And besides, I'm not a drinker anyway.
So you weren't out, no beers at dinner?
I don't drink at all.
Clear-headed, completely clear-headed.
Clear.
And you weren't alone. There were other people with you.
Well, I had duty the next day, so I wanted to get back before everybody else, and I was way ahead of everybody.
But if your friends were 30 paces behind you, don't you think they would have a clear eye line to it?
Again, they was only there for maybe 15 seconds or so. I was actually telling them to hurry up to get to see it, so to make sure I wasn't crazy.
And what did they think about what you saw?
They thought I was crazy. They didn't see anything, so, you know, it was just one of those nights.
The underwater structures that retired U.S. War Games planner Butch Diaz discovered are pointing directly at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Petty Officer Charles Howard sees a USO off Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Unidentified submerged objects. They are exactly the same UFOs you see in the air, in the sky. They are the same, underwater.
Maximilien de Lafayette has been studying USOs for 20 years. He's written a book about USOs and extraterrestrials at sea. He believes that the sightings at Guantanamo Bay and Gulf Breeze are actually part of a much bigger picture.
The whole USO, the chassis of the machine is in apparatus. And there is a kind of shield around the USO that never touch the water. You put your hand in a glass, pull it out, it's going to drip. USO don't drip because they don't touch the water. First, they don't splash. Why? Because in front of the machine, they open vacuum space. This is why they need this tunnel. This is why they are never wet.
According to Maximilien, USOs are entering the water without creating a splash, and this is accomplished by some kind of a force field or vacuum surrounding the craft, which allows it to push the water aside without actually touching it.
Why in the Caribbean? Why in the Gulf?
Based upon report, there are 12 bases for the USO. Underwater, there are tunnels, there are corridors that they connect one base to another base.
You mean under the ocean floor, there are tunnels?
Yes.
Maximilien gets his information about these underwater bases from unidentified military and NASA sources. Unfortunately, there's just no way to confirm the validity of this information.
So it's not like these UFO bases are any kind of construction, any kind of cities or a little bubble under the water. They're actually living in the hollows of the earth.
Correct. They are interconnected from Alaska to Japan to Finland to England to the Caribbean.
If this network of tunnels leads to a USO base off the coast of Cuba, this could explain the multiple sightings taking place around Gulf Breeze.
Very sophisticated channels. And don't think when you say corridor, they were built from solid structure such as cement or metal. No, it's solid plasma. And they can move it. They can move the tunnel where they need it, to place it where they need to navigate.
Maximilian just dropped a bombshell. He says these underwater structures are plasma tunnels capable of appearing and disappearing without warning. It certainly explains why these underwater structures off the coast of Cuba aren't visible in every satellite image that's been taken.
Well, we've come up with some excellent information. We know from Butch that there's a strange underwater structure off the coast of Cuba, and we know from Max that it could be the site of some kind of USO base. Hopefully we can get close to this underwater structure and have a look.
So we've just gotten some great news. The United States government has just approved our going to Cuba to look for these underwater sites.
Oh, that's fantastic, because then we can scuba dive on the underwater structures and see what they are.
That's good. Maybe we'll actually get some real proof about what's underneath the water there. We're going to Cuba, and this is great. We're actually going to go to dive down and see this underwater structure. And I'm not sure what we're going to find, but I suspect there's going to be some conventional explanation to it.
Now, if you're going to Cuba to learn the mambo, you'll have a great time. But to dig in the Cuban USO file, no way, Jose.
Well, why not? I mean, tourists go to Cuba all the time.
You're American. You want to go there and uncover all their secrets and come back to the United States? You know who will be at the airport waiting for you to get those files from you. The Cuban will never let you have a look at their secret USO file.
When we told them, though, that we had to get to Cuba and we've gotten permission to go to Cuba, Max predicts we'll never go. We'll see who's right. We're here in South Florida today because we should have been in Cuba. We received written permission from the United States government to go to Cuba for our investigation. And we received verbal permission from the Cuban government to visit there to investigate. Until they found out we're investigating UFOs. They denied our application flat. They said, quote, no, we want no part of that, which astounds me. Because the hard part is usually getting permission from the United States. It was the Cubans learning we were investigating UFO activity and USO activity in Cuban waters. That's what shut us down.
So although we can't get into Cuba to talk to eyewitnesses there, we have 3 eyewitnesses who were residents of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, who have an amazing UFO story to tell us.
My name is Nick Baggett.